recently learned about reverse racism because my dad's part black, and he told me a story about how one time he went into a black bar, so it's like a club where only black people.
Yeah. This was Saga feel like in the nighttime. Watch what she do when the light shine.
Hey y'all, I just wanted to come up on here real quick and just let you know what's going on. It's not an update. It's not another one of those. Don't worry. But as you can see in the title, I'm starting a new segment. I forgot to mention it in my last video, but it's kind of just gonna be like a topic type segment, and I'll have like different people within this Zoom. It is through Zoom. So yeah, it's just like a topic type thing. The topic for this one, we kind of do like themes and then we do a topic. So like the theme is like, how about I shake the room? Hey.
Shake the room, shake it. How about I shake the room?
This is gonna be talking about colorism, texturism, and it's the main thing is anti-blackness within our cultures. Since there'll be like different people from different backgrounds within the talk. So I just wanted to give y'all a little intro before we jump right into it. For sharing.
Tolu, I had a question for you.
Yes.
What did you mean by anti-blackness, and how is that different from prejudice and plain racism? Like, just so that I can understand it better.
Being Nigerian and a lot of African culture or African communities, I mean, there's like a thing where African people try to separate themselves.
Yeah, I had a question on that because what I found was when I did some research on anti-blackness, I found stuff directing me to negrophobia, and the way they defined it was a fear, hatred, or extreme aversion to black people and black culture worldwide. So it's...
Yeah, I've never heard that term before, but yeah, that's basically like what it is. And it's very common in non-black and non-black communities.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what anti-blackness is. And it's something that I've seen like quite often, unfortunately, even though like a lot of my family members are like black, like their history starts here with like slavery and all that. So and also it also has to do with the fact that a lot of Africans, they don't really talk about like what happened in Africa, like with slavery. I was even talking to my mom, like they in their history classes, they don't even talk about the fact that the British came there and like did all that colonization. Yeah, it's crazy, like that the British did all that colonization, and it's like y'all saw these white people here. Were y'all not questioning like what's going on? And it's just like it's not talked about. But like when they come here, they kind of hold white people to like a pedestal, and for black people they just look down.
Oh, that was really excellent.
Because it's not just racism, but it's this, even among people of color, there can be an aversion to
darker complexions.
Yeah.
Complexions and colorism and blackness.
Okay.
Yeah. I know that so my grandfather is from Mexico, so I was raised white, but I do consider myself of Latina heritage, but I am obviously like, you know, I'm a white Latina, you know, like my aunts, my mom is very much white passing, several of my aunts are not, and they have been targeted as like for racially derogatory remarks. Like my aunt was followed around a Walmart one time by two white boys calling her a beaner and like a wetback and shit. But at the same time, they can themselves be very anti-black, and I have heard them say comments that are very, very much of a racist, stereotypical nature, which is disappointing coming from your own family members. But I know that is a thing that happens, and my mom does not think that she can be racist because she is half Latino. I don't know if that's a common thing, but I know that that's her train of thinking.
Yeah, it's pretty common. Like even in an African household and stuff like that, growing up, um, just a lot of the shit that my grandma used to say growing up was like, "You don't think this affects you?" Like when she would talk about like black people and things she saw on the news. Because honestly, as a refugee, like outside of the Sudanese community, the only like outside world like she interacted with commonly was the news. You know, that's where she got all her information from. So as an African, when she's always seeing black or African Americans on the news, she wants to remove herself from like the category black and just stick to just African. And I don't know, like growing up, I heard my grandma say a lot of anti-black stuff. Like if you ever see a white person hang out with a black person, that white person probably does drugs too. Like just
My
weird stuff
mom
like that.
says that. She says that.
Oh my God.
Madness. Yes. She always says that nonsense. She'd be like, oh my gosh, if you see a black person and a white person together, then they're probably doing drugs together. And I'm like,
Yup,
girl,
that's
what?
exactly what my grandma says all the
Like,
damn time.
what? Like, it's really
Yeah.
crazy.
And I don't know how your family got here, but my family came here as refugees with the help of the UN and stuff like that, and they gave them orientations before coming to America.
Yup.
And they showed a lot of imagery of like thugs and people you should look out for. And my grandma said like in all those pictures and videos and stuff they gave them during the orientation, she never once saw a white person portrayed as a criminal. It was always a victim. So that stuff sticks around too.
Yeah.
The power of the media. Wow.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah, because they before 1996, they've never been in this country. They never dreamed of being in the United States. So if that was the only thing like they were telling them about the black population here, of course, like, yeah. I'm sorry, I kind of hijacked and kind of started rambling.
No.
My bad.
No, this is like the whole point. This is the whole point of the conversation.
Yeah.
I know as
But-
black women. Oh, sorry, Tolu.
No, go ahead, Ruba.
I know as black women who are adventurous, like Vicky and Tolu and I, when we talk about these things, and Tiara too, when we talk about like traveling to different countries and things, we constantly have to keep that in mind, the anti-blackness that exists in these communities of color, even if we're going overseas to the Middle East. Or I know some people, I was talking to my black friends about anti-blackness in the Middle East, and they couldn't believe it. Like they've never.
Oh yeah.
Like, and it's such a big thing. Vicky, you and I really know because our families.
We're Sudanese.
Exactly. We're South Sudanese, and our parents were subjected, our families were subjected to slavery by Arabs. We were subjected to apartheid. We were subjected to genocide, all these things. And like, I showed them the clips of like the movie clips in which this was, and I think a lot of white people don't have to go through that. They don't have to think about, oh, how am I?
Is this place racist?
Country. Yes. Yes. Even if it is around people of color, like they still might, even though they might not be entirely comfortable, they not always have to have a fear of their safety. There's been so many instances of Black people studying abroad and being killed through mob mentality. We had like that college boy who was there, and they
In Greece.
Yeah.
that he hollered at a female, and that's like shit that happened in the 1900s here. And he was killed.
With Emmett Till.
Yeah.
Oh, and she even came out and said that she had lied about it too.
And she still wasn't persecuted or anything.
And
So
his grave is constantly vandalized. Like,
and we still, Vicky, we know this very well. There is a city in South Sudan called Atlabara, correct?
No, it's a neighborhood.
A neighborhood called Atlabara. And that means get out.
Get out.
Like, and the reason why it's called that is because when Northern Sudanese soldiers came down into that village, they told the men in the family to stand outside. as they assaulted the women in the household
And the girls.
and the girls.
And just keep in mind, like, Northern Sudanese people are like mixed with Arabs, so they can because anti-blackness, they consider themselves Arab. So when they look at us, they don't even look at us like we are the same people, or like, yeah, like, this is still your land, like they're the original people of this land, but they don't see that they don't see that in themselves. They see themselves as Arabs, like they're the children of colonizers.
I've also heard people who don't consider themselves Arabs but consider themselves Sudanese, which to me is just, it really just gets into your history and how you identify at that point, because there's so much politics involved in that and so much history. Yeah, that's what I have to share.
I hope you guys don't mind that I'm not talking. I'm just listening and learning right now, so.
Yeah, like, definitely feel free to listen, but also feel free if anything comes to mind, because I know colorism in this society, or even featureism, we haven't even hit on that yet. Like, people who have more Afro-centered features in certain communities are looked down upon as well. So we could talk about that as well. Just if you've had any sort of interaction, or if you've noticed it even in the media, feel free to speak on it, because we are living in the society, and I know y'all are not blind. Y'all have seen some things.
Absolutely, in the media, absolutely, like in movies and stuff, and you hear in the actor communities of, like, I mean, even if you just look at movies and stuff, you tend to see more lighter skinned women of color represented, or lighter skinned Black women tend to be represented more than darker skinned Black women in movies about Black people. I know that Zoe Saldana,
I was just about to bring that up,
was in that movie about Nina Simone.
Nina Simone. Yeah,
that was horrible.
They gave her a prosthetic nose, and it's like, why not just,
what's the point? Yeah,
And making her skin darker. Like, what is that? You could have got a darker skinned woman.
Yeah.
And part of Nina Simone's struggle and her whole, like, story was about being dark and having these Africanoid features.
Yeah.
I can't believe I just used this colonizer term, Africanoid.
I've never heard that term before ever in life. I've never heard that.
Vicky, when I did research on, like, the Ottoman Empire and their enslavement of South Sudanese folks, they refer to our features as Negroid.
Negroid.
Like, what? Never heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, like, even to talk about that, like, I didn't even know that, like, Afro Latinx people existed until college. Like, I didn't know at all, because, like, the representation I've always seen was J-Lo. Like, I've always just seen J-Lo. If it wasn't Jennifer Lopez, then I didn't know what was going on. And then, like, I had this longtime friend. She kept on telling me that her dad was Puerto Rican, and I'm like, but y'all are Black. What are you talking about? I was like, well, where are they from? She said, he's Puerto Rican. I said, but, like, where are they from? Like, where in America are they from?
You hit her with that microaggression.
Yes, and it's like, but I knew her, like, this happened back in the 7th grade. Like, this was 7th grade me, because I was very confused on what she was trying to get at. And she's like, hey, he speaks Spanish, and, like, he's Puerto Rican, and, you know, he tried to teach me some Spanish too. And her mom is, like, from the Virgin Islands, so I was just like, I'm very confused on what's going on. It wasn't until college I realized that her dad was literally from Puerto Rico. Like, he's Afro Latino. Like, that's what was going on. It was just like, that's just crazy, the amount of like ignorance there is about people that are different, like, shades and skin tones, because I'm so used to seeing, like, lighter skin tones of people that speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, I recently learned about reverse racism, because my dad's part Black, and he told me a story about how one time he went into a Black bar, so it's like a club where only Black people go, and he walked in there, and people looked at him and like, what are you doing in here? And he's like, I'm just hanging out, you know. And my dad, he's lighter skinned and stuff, but he considers himself Black because, well, he is Black. He just has a white dad. And these guys looked at him, and he's like, I'm just hanging out. And the guys are like, you're not black enough to be in here. And then there's places that my dad goes where people are like, you're not white enough to be here. So I've actually just learned about reverse racism through my dad. So I don't know if you guys have heard of that or, yeah.
What I've heard about reverse racism, that it doesn't exist. Anyway, I'm not even trying to like discredit what your dad said or anything, but like this is just like, because there's like many definitions of what racism means, but it really has to do with the fact that like one group having systematic power over another group. And like, I guess an easy example that a lot of people use is like slavery and how like white people had that power over Black people. But a lot of people bring up the fact, well, you know, there's been times where Black people have been slave owners too, but it's like, that's what I like when I hear reverse racism. That's like what I'm like, what I feel like we're trying to get at. Yeah, I feel like the situation with your dad going to like a predominantly Black bar and being told like he's not Black enough, that to me, it leans towards more like colorism more than anything. Because like colorism more has to do with the fact like, if I was like trying to audition for a movie and they wanted a lighter girl, but they didn't like have that on the sign. It was just like I've seen like the little casting calls. They have like A, B, C, like the way that they do girls. Like A is like a girl that's closer to Beyonce features. That's what I've seen. I've seen this like on like a casting thing, like Beyonce features. Then they have one that's like, oh, a mixed race girl for B, and then for like D, it's like a dark skinned girl from the hood features. It's crazy, and that's what like colorism, like that's the type of things that go on like when it has to do with like colorism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense actually.
So a lot of it, like with colorism, a lot of it has to do with like your shade of your skin tone. So like for you, if someone was to say, well, you know what, you shouldn't really claim the Blackness within you because your dad's not fully Black. That's like,
I have had that before actually.
Yeah, that's something a colorist would say, because they're trying to not only like discredit you, but it's also like the word is on the tip of my tongue, but I cannot think of it. But it's like they're trying to basically like take away the fact that you have Black within you and erase
like
that.
Invalidate the Blackness.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of that to me, like it leans more towards like colorism. What happened when he went to the white bar? That's definitely racism. That's definitely racism.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of that has to do with like colorism, because like for me, I was out with like my cousin, and she's lighter than me, and I'm like a darker skin tone, and like this guy was like saying a red to her, like referring to her as being red because she's lighter skin tone. And it was like, yeah, it's yeah. So hopefully that makes sense to you.
Yeah,
like,
I think I might bring that up to my dad actually and tell him what I just learned, because maybe he's never heard of colorism, you know, so that actually makes a lot more sense and kind of fits the story a bit better. So thanks.
That reminded me of the stolen generation in Australia. The Aboriginal children are, I don't know the proper name. I don't know if that's the colonizer term or what, because I'm sure that they have, you know, every group has their own name for themselves. I just don't know what their own term is. But those children were very similar to what happened to Native American children in the United States, where they were taken into colonizer schools and their identities and culture and history were erased and that sort of thing. And I think there was like children who were mixed were also really discriminated against too.
They called them half caste, like half casted to society.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That's fucked.
Yeah.
Use my language.
I know that's not necessarily an anti-Blackness thing. I was reminded of the term when you were talking on the subject of mixed race discrimination, I guess.
Yeah, and they're still like horribly like treated to this day. Like when you think of Australia, you think of like
white
someone
people.
with Australian, like with the Australian accent, lighter skin tone. I had no idea that they had indigenous people on like in Australia. So it's just crazy the way that people are treated because of like their skin tone, their features. And like when you do see like the indigenous people in Australia, like they are very similar to like how African people look. So
yeah, that's true. And then like their culture, like how you said like there were, I'm sorry, let me show my face clearly. But like how you mentioned like how they were treated like the Native Americans and whatnot, like yeah, like even over there, like people look at them like they're just alcoholics, don't have anything going for them. They treat them like they're just living off the government. But before they were colonized, they were living off the land, living a free life. And it's crazy because now the stereotype is that they're lazy, they don't do anything, this, that, and the third.
And can people stop saying that just immigrants built this nation? Like Native Americans built this nation first. Let's put some
okay.
Period. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's been a big issue with Hamilton. One of the criticisms is like they keep calling Hamilton an immigrant, and it's like, well, yes, Lin-Manuel Miranda, you related to that experience since he was like from the Caribbean, but he was also a white dude who just like moved up. He wasn't necessarily an immigrant. So that's been a big criticism with like calling some of the founding fathers immigrants has been like a big criticism with Hamilton lately too, because like
yeah, especially since they don't go through like the modern day immigrant experience, like especially being white, you automatically come in with power, so it doesn't fit to call them immigrants. I mean, yes, we had like Italian immigrants and like Irish immigrants back in like the 1900s and stuff like that, but that's different. Like they actually had to break their way into society. These founding fathers didn't have to do any of that.
Nope.
And they still had privilege, given that they were
power.
Yeah.
I think that's. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you guys.
You go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I think a lot of white people who are very resistant to it. What's that that older woman, Jane Elliott?
Yes.
Teaching about how white people are inherently, you grow up in an inherently racist society. You're going to develop racist tendencies regardless of what your ethics are, your morality, your religion. Like you can still inherently be a good, but still have, you're raised with that racist ideology. And I know that a lot of particularly white people are very resistant to that because, they don't want to be called a racist. And it's like, white tears are, Black lives are worth more than white tears, So it's just, you have to confront your, like when I can think of examples when I did some kind of microaggression, like when I was a kid, I did a Jamaican accent one time, or I touched a girl's hair and I didn't, it was a thing that you're, a respect thing. You shouldn't, touch someone's hair without permission or anything. And it's coming to recognize that within yourself.
Yes.
Those behaviors and being like, I was ignorant of this before, and now I know the what do you call it? The history behind it, and now I know not to do this in the future.
I think I've done that once as a kid, actually.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up something that I didn't completely agree with you on, Mariah, that I can see people who are born, let's say white people who are born into a, I guess, a household and maybe community where they don't interact with people of other color, and that they are told to be respectful, and they have a lot of fortunate circumstances going for them. And I can see them growing up to be, having benefited off of a system that helps them out a lot, but not necessarily being racist. Maybe like I think they could probably develop prejudices. Like they have inherently, like no matter what, we develop prejudices for good or for bad that we seek to correct about ourselves once we're aware of them. But I think a person in that circumstance could grow up to be prejudiced, but not necessarily racist. Like, I'm not sure if that makes sense. That like, I think a racist means like really having like an intentional like action, like to really be, put somebody like.
Not necessarily. I think.
No, you can be
I
unconscious. It can be
Yeah.
unconscious racism, and it can be implicit as well.
Yeah.
So racial microaggressions is based on modern day racism. There's a lot of people I think who do not know that they're racist. And you're talking about community and family and household, but you're not also talking about education. And Eurocentricity in education can also contribute to that.
So what's the difference between being prejudiced and what was the other word?
Racism versus prejudice?
No. You said another word. External racist, or what was the word you said?
Microaggression?
Implicit.
Is it unconscious?
Unconscious. There we go. Unconscious racism and prejudice. What's the difference to you?
Well, I'd say you grow up, it's like seeing in the media or growing up with your education. Like, for example, a direct experience that I can think of when I was a kid was we were learning about the Spanish conquistadors who colonized South America. And one day we were asked if we thought that they helped or hindered the Native Americans. And to me, we shouldn't have even been asked that question, because it's very clear when you look back at history that all of these communities were absolutely decimated culturally and colonized and very much destroyed in so many different ways. We weren't taught that in school. And you can grow up with that mentality, and if you never learn about that, I mean, there's people who don't know that Aztec people, for example, are still around, or that Maya are still around, because you learn in school that they're called like the ancient Maya or the ancient Aztec, but the descendants of those people are still around today, So
Yeah, I'm still having a difficulty understanding the difference between unconscious racism and prejudice, because in my mind, a person can be prejudiced and not be aware that they're being prejudiced, but they are making preferences for some people over other, but they're not conscious of it. And if they are informed of it, they might change how they act. So I'm just unclear, like what's the distinguishing feature between unconscious racist and prejudice?
I guess when I think of prejudice, I think of classism more than I think of racism. When I think of prejudice, I tend to apply it more as like people are prejudiced against like poor people. I guess I haven't thought about that in a racism context. I tend to think of it more of in a classism context, I guess. I'd be interested in reading more about.
Yeah, I'd like some more information.
I haven't read. I definitely need to read more texts. I know that there's a book I really want to read called Why I've Stopped Talking to White People About Race, that I wanted to read, and then there was one by Audre Lorde that I need to finish called The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. I'll say right now, my understanding of a lot of these things comes from sources that I've read online or from other people, and I definitely need to read more actual books from academic scholars and people who've gone through this, and just listening is a big thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the reason I bring this up is because as like a lighter skinned Latino, I like I know I feel like I've benefited from some colorism, that I've been treated a little better than Latino people who don't have the lighter complexion, and that's unfair. Um, and I know some, yeah, and like those people who practice, like act out of coloristic influences, um, they are working out of some kind of prejudice, that they're not trying to be discriminatory to people of darker skin, but they are in fact doing so, but they're not intentionally doing with like a nefarious intent, like a racist intent. So yeah, I think I need to do some more research. Maybe prejudice is is a synonym for unconscious racism, or it's really not, and I'm not sure.
I believe it's both. I believe that there are prejudices that can be implicit. Okay, so there can be unconscious prejudices that people aren't aware of, but then there are also explicit prejudices that people are very much so aware of and still act on them anyway.
Yeah, I would call that racist action then. Explicit, like conscious prejudice. You're like choosing to become that racist character. But an unconscious.
Necessarily, here's the thing. I don't necessarily think that there's a difference in whether or not you choose or not choose to be racist, because it still has the same racial traumatic effect.
I think they definitely can have the same effect, but the kind of action that it is, I think, is significantly different. Just like interiorly, like exteriorly, you're gonna make the other person, like you're gonna put down their human dignity by either of the actions, but one of them is a more nefarious action, and the other one is less so because of ignorance. So
I feel like with prejudice, I feel like what River was saying, it can be intentional or else it can be unintentional. Like from my personal experiences, I would say like even anti-blackness could breed prejudice views. Like a few years ago, how Kodak Black said he doesn't date dark-skinned women because they're gutter. So I think that came from a place of prejudice, and he has some internalized anti-blackness going on,
yeah.
and that could be the root cause of the prejudice.
Right.
So I feel like prejudice is, in my opinion, it's like, I don't know how to word this. I have it in my head, but I don't know how to word it. Prejudice always has a root cause, whether we know it's there or not.
Yes.
Basically, all I'm trying to say.
Right.
Just to kind of go back to something you mentioned, Jose, did you like say that you know some people that were like unconsciously prejudiced, or was it just like a general statement?
I say that I can think of situations where people can be, can be prejudiced, but not necessarily racist through no fault of their own. They just haven't been exposed to other people, haven't been exposed to how to, treat other cultures with respect, how to not think that their way is the right way or the only way to do things. That they think like other is bad instead of other and different is good. So like I'm not saying that. So people who grow up in that situation may not necessarily be racist, but they'll have a kind of a preconceived notions that their way of doing things, that their view, that their lifestyle is the correct way, and that different is inferior or bad and that can be a prejudice that they develop because they haven't been exposed to differences. So.
Okay, because just hearing that, I've heard people tell me in like various different backgrounds, tell me that their parents or grandparents have said, oh, don't have a child with a darker skinned person. We need to lighten up the bloodline. We need to keep the bloodline lighter. We need to have the kids lighter. Sorry, my brother was bringing me my shoes. But yeah, I've heard that like people have said like their grandparents or parents have told them like don't have kids with someone that's darker than you or dark because we want to have a child that's more closer to like European standards basically. And I think that kind of goes with the fact of you saying that like some people have been taught, if that's what you're trying to imply, like some people have been taught to think in a manner that they thought that was right. Is that like what you were saying? Yeah.
To some extent, like that example that you gave up is something that I think is still prevalent in a lot of Latin American countries. In Mexico, I've had family members who've told my cousins that exact same thing, to avoid dating somebody who is darker skinned because you got to lighten up the population for some reason. And I don't know how to describe that, like very colorist and anti-black, racist to some extent. I'm not sure. I was thinking
it's definitely colorist, but I guess if you want to use the example of Mexico, not everybody in Mexico is black, so it could just have to, it's more like colorist too, because I've met people that are Mexican that are of darker skin tone. I've also met people that look white. Like you look at them, they have blonde hair, blue eyes, and they're Mexican. So like a lot of it does have to do with like colorist like mentality of believing that.
The example that I had in mind was a person grew up in a, let's say like a small town, predominantly European American, never interacts with anybody from a different race or different culture, grows up, only being exposed to their way of things, not having an opportunity to interact with others and actually show respect to other people. And then maybe in their lifetime, maybe they never leave that town, but they just already have some like preconceived notions of what, I don't know, how people are supposed to be. Like, I don't know, like people might not be. I
understand what you mean, like what people of color behave like, look like, what their mannerisms are. Yeah. So like a mentality that was like taught to them basically in their environment.
Yeah, and then like maybe if they do leave that area, that environment for something, and they're exposed to somebody of color, they just don't know how to interact. They don't know how to say the right thing. They don't know how to like actually be respectful and a decent person. I've seen situations like that. It's like I feel like people overthink it. Just be respectful. Listen to them. Don't assume anything about them. But people freak out. People, I don't know, something short circuits. And
I think that was very common at our university because that was like the case for a lot of people. They had never seen people of color before. Like that was their first time. Mm-hmm. And they came from like smaller towns. I met someone that was like, he came from a town that was like 30 people. Like that was it. It was just 30 people in the town. And that like coming to school, that was the most diversity he's ever experienced. Like that wasn't through the TV. Like he was seeing people right then and there on campus for the first time. So I think it definitely has like an impact on the way that people think, but you can't expect people not to have any assumptions when they're meeting these people, because that's like human nature. We look at someone, we have a judgment of this person.
That's prejudice. Would that be correct, or am I wrong?
No, I'm just saying a judgment, and hopefully you're not just looking at someone just being prejudiced, but I'm just saying like you just have a judgment of somebody looking at them. And
that is prejudice.
no, I'm saying like, okay, you think this person, like Jose, for example, if I didn't know him and I saw him thinking that he was rich because he's wearing a suit, like that's the prejudice. Look at me learning. Look at me learning something. Yes, we love the vibes. I'm learning a little something here and there. Sprinkle it. Look at that.
Pre-judgment, girl. Pre-judgment.
Look at that.
I think the key is for those people who, like the example you gave, like those people that come from a home, like a town of 30 people or like 30 families, whatever, and they're exposed to people of different cultures. The key is, I think, for them to realize that person's an individual. They've got their own human dignity. You may be aware that you already suddenly have like ideas of who they are as a person based on their appearance, but that you have to be open to having that being invalidated, that they are more than any assumptions that you may have about them. And you have to be open-minded. You have to have that humility to know what you think is the truth about them, maybe not, or is probably not, because they are individuals themselves. I don't know. Just something to throw out. Humility. Humility is key.
And people have to be willing to question themselves. I know a lot of people on that campus who did not question themselves, not one bit. Okay? And at the end of the day, whether or not they knew it, I didn't know where they came from. I didn't know their background. Maybe if we had engaged further in dialogue, we could have figured that out. But based off of how it was treated off of the first meeting, that sort of, eliminated any other further meetings between me and a lot of white folks that were on that campus. The effects of the racial trauma were the same, whether or not they knew about it or not. And it is what it is. That's how I feel about it.
And I feel like the experience on campus, it was very much a culture shock for a lot of people. Yes. A lot of my classmates that were Spanish speaking, a lot of them went to predominantly Spanish speaking high schools or Catholic high schools. And the ones I did go to predominantly Spanish-speaking high schools, when they came to St. Mary's, it was a culture shock for them because they've never been around so much white people before. That's what I heard from like one of my friends. She said she had never been around so much white people before, and it was just shocking to her. It was a culture shock for her.
Same.
And I was just like, for me, the culture shock was when people were saying they never seen Black people before, because it was just like, I don't know, maybe because like I've always either lived in the city or the suburbs. It was just like, I've seen I've seen like basically anyone I needed to see that's on this campus. So, and like, I think for me, it was unfortunately, it was very helpful for me to come from a school in the suburbs, because it wasn't as much as a culture shock as it would have been if I continued going to the high school I went to in the city, because just knowing like it was a culture shock for them because they've never been around so much white people before. That's what I heard from like one of my friends. She said she had never been around so much white people before, and it was just shocking to her. It was a culture shock for her.
Same.
And I was just like, for me, the culture shock was when people were saying they never seen Black people before, because it was just like, I don't know, maybe because like I've always either lived in the city or the suburbs. It was just like, I've seen I've seen like basically anyone I needed to see that's on this campus. So, and like, I think for me, it was unfortunately, it was very helpful for me to come from a school in the suburbs, because going to St. Mary's, it wasn't as much as a culture shock as it would have been if I continued going to the high school I went to in the city, because just knowing like how to interact with people that didn't come from like the same background as me, or understood like what is acceptable and what's not acceptable, like don't jump at people if they try to reach for your hair. Just tell them like, don't touch me. Just like stuff like that. So I know for like a lot of people, it was just like very shocking for them to be on campus because it was just like they had never seen nothing like this before. They had never been like the minority within the school. So yeah. And like, I don't know, I saw firsthand of people just being shocked on the other end too, of like not experiencing diversity within their communities. I've been asked, a student had asked me if I was an international student, and I was just like, I was very confused because we're both in the international center right now together. We're both enjoying this free food, and I'm the international student. So it's just like, I was just very confused because it was just like people, a lot of people kind of know me on this campus. They see me before, and it's just like, I've never got the question, am I an international student? And I was just like, what? I was
You
like,
could
where
have
are
turned
you
it
from?
back. You could have turned it on that. No, are you the international student?
I asked him, I said like, oh, you're from Minnesota? I need to change my ways. Because I told him, I was like, oh, I'm from the capital. And he just kind of like, his face kind of shifted because you could tell he was kind of like, oh, now I feel dumb because like I that she international student. It's just like, I've never heard this before. But I definitely feel like college has been like a learning, it's still going on for me, but like I definitely feel like so far it's been a learning experience, especially since these are some of the same personalities that I will have to deal with in the real world after college.
Definitely.
So I definitely think like conversations like this is very helpful.
Yeah, and I know I have a lot to learn too. Like, so this is good. Like before this meeting, I did not do much research about colorism. Like I had a sense that it existed, but I didn't really know what the word was for it. So this is good. Like to talk about it after, you know, doing some research.
Featureism, because I just learned that from Ruba, and I did not know what that was. But basically, if y'all don't know what futurism is, it has to do with like having more European features. So like a pointier nose, silkier hair,
wider eyes,
lighter eyes. So that kind of thing. But I also think it's very odd that that exists during this time, especially since so many women that are not Black want to go and get fillers or get a bigger butt, that kind of thing. So like kind of moving more towards like African features,
but not too much.
Yeah,
just enough to make you racially ambiguous and attractive.
And then like kind of going, I don't know if you've heard the term like blackfishing, that's starting to get really big, where people want to tan their skin to look tanner than they are, so you can't really tell like what their
actual ethnicity or
what their racial background is.
Okay, you can say Ariana Grande.
I was just about to
I've read like 5 different blog posts, like all about like the fact that the way that she speaks, the way that she's like changed her voice, like videos comparing when she was younger, photos showing like she's very naturally very pale.
Yeah, really pale.
She's like, there was like a picture that was showing her next to Nicki Minaj, and they were almost exactly the same tone. I'm like, girl, no, stop.
And the Kardashians too.
Oh, there you go.
You
just have to realize, like, society is really exoticizing and fetishizing the shit out of darker complexions.
Well, society has also commercialized a lot of like African American inspiration, like creativity.
But they don't want the injustice. They don't want the injustice.
I remember like my freshman year of college, they put like a little coupon in our mailbox to get a free tan. And I was just laughing because I'm like, what is this for? What am I gonna do with this?
I'm gonna go get a tan. Yeah,
a different coupon here, something for some ice cream.
They told him you got a year-round tan.
Period. Say it louder for the people in the back, Tiara.
period. Oh, they could have told us we could have got our nails done or something. You know, they could have given a discount on something else.
A meal off campus.
Hello.
IV gift card, something.
Hello.
Yeah.
He gave us a tanning card. What am I gonna do with the tanning card?
Yeah. I'm like, you know what I look like when I'm tan? I look orange. That's what I look like. I'm like, let me be the pale goth that I was meant to be. I don't.
Clean. Period.
And then, like, for me, it also gets like uncomfortable for me when people like, I'm trying to not say directly what it is, but when I'm working with a group of people and they want to talk about like, oh, it's so hard getting a tan, I peel when I tan, I'm just sitting there like,
oh my God, I'm bigger than you.
I had somebody ask me, like, I went on I don't even know to call it a mission trip, a service trip, and and to Oklahoma, and somebody, when we got back, they asked me if I got a tan, and I was like, I don't get that. I get browner, I do, but I don't get like, yeah, like I don't get like a gigantic difference of shade here. So I don't know, it just gets like very uncomfortable for me because like people are like, oh, I get so red, oh, I peel so much, and it's just like I can't pretend to put an input like, oh my gosh, me too, I get red too. It's just like I don't know really what to do in those type of situations because it's just like, okay. And then like the worst of the worst is like when people will be like, oh my gosh, we're almost the same color. And it's just like,
oh, no.
How are you the same shade as me?
Oh my gosh, you're so black. I remember 2 white women were having that conversation in my psychology class, and I had to look at my professor like, you better get these women. I'm not the one. No.
And did he get them? Please tell me he got them.
No. My professor was doing work. She was like, huh? And they were gone by then, skedaddled.
Not skedaddled now.
You had to. Tiara, it was so nice to hear your voice.
Yes. It's been so long.
I would love to hear input from either Monica or Natalie, because y'all come from different cultures as well.
Yeah.
a time to provide input. Yes, Natalie, you know, JoJo be telling me, she be telling me about the culture. I want to hear from you as well. I want to hear some flavors from you, from all of y'all.
And we already know in India, we already know about that, the bleaching creams, girl.
Oh,
I was gonna say, so is that goes with colorism or futurism? Because I was thinking.
Colorism.
And I have been hearing the conversations, like a lot of Indians are waking up and there's like, you know, they're becoming woke and they're like, it's not good for us. Like, why are we bleaching our skin? And growing up, I had a friend that always used certain kind of creams to bleach her face.
Fair and lovely.
Why she was doing that?
Yeah.
Honestly, why was she? I'm like, you are good the way you look, you know? Like, you don't have to change anything about yourself, but even coming here, now I'm surrounded by some of the people from India or Pakistan. We have like similar cultures. So what I'm hearing is they want to get their face looking whiter. Oh, you look white. Like, I don't know how to put this into words.
Take your time.
Like, it's there. They're still thinking like white is good. Dark is not good. And I don't know how to change that mentality, because it's ingrained in them. Like, okay, if you're light, you're gonna get better husband and whatever.
That reminds me of my old boss, Lee. I worked at Ichi Tokyo in Rochester for a bit, and I noticed her makeup one day. I'm like, why do you wear so much makeup? Like, you're so pretty. And she's like, well, I need to look whiter. And I'm like, why do you need to look whiter? And she's like, because it's more beautiful. And I'm like, I didn't know how to comprehend that at the time. And then I'm like, and she's like, I have freckles. And I'm like, well, I have freckles too. I guess I enjoy my freckles. And she's like, oh, freckles not good. No beauty in freckle. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't get it. Like, why people want to whiten their skin. So I don't know. That just what you were saying reminded me of that.
So I want to talk about like what Monica said, and then I also want to talk about something else as well. But I wanted to just say, like, there's a show on Netflix. It's called Never Have I Ever, and the main character, well, the whole like family, they're Indian, and I know that was really big for a lot of people of like a darker skin tone that was from India, because they're like, oh, this is big for the brown girls, and like I never realized like the divide within like lighter, because then you see, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but Nick Jonas's wife,
Priyanka Chopra.
yeah, and like she has a lighter skin tone compared to like a lot of the Indian girls that I've seen that are brown. So and that's big in Africa. Like a lot of people use bleaching cream, like, and a lot of people were mad when Black China came to Nigeria to promote her bleaching cream for like, I'm trying to translate it into American money. I think it was like $100 for like just one jar of bleaching cream to make
it was $250.
Okay, yeah, I don't know Naira, so, but yeah, it was a lot of money, and it's like, people should be using the money for other things, but you're coming to our country to promote your cream to make people lighter, when people in Nigeria have all different tones of melanin, and that's what they should be proud of. So like bleaching cream is still like very prevalent to this day. And then just to go back to like why people want to be lighter, a lot of it has to be the fact that there's people in like everywhere that are passing white, and with that you get a lot more privilege, you get a lot more opportunities. Even though you're not white, you still look white, you're still going to get more opportunities. Like I have a professor, I didn't know that she was Mexican until she had said like her mom is, and you even saw like pictures of her nephew and nieces and they're brown. But she looks like she has very light skin. She has silky straight hair. If you y'all probably know who I'm talking about.
I'll talk about it with her too.
And yeah, she has very silky like hair, and I didn't know until like one of my friends had brought it up. They're like, you know that Professor so and so is Mexican. I was like, what? She's like, I could tell. We had like a vibe going. I was like, what? I went to go and ask her, I was like, I don't want to be rude, but are you Mexican? She's like, yeah, my mom is. And she was just so happy to talk about it. So like, it is like when you do look white or you have European features, you are more acceptable to the predominant society. And like, I saw this video of this Black girl. She didn't have like the features, but because of the way that she spoke, the mom felt like, oh, you're more acceptable for my son because you don't talk like other Black people talk. That's a conversation for another day.
That's a good conversation to have.
Yeah,
it's definitely the next one.
Right.
It's called entanglement. That's just a little sneak peek. That's a little sneak peek. It's called a new type of entanglement, but we won't get into that. We're talking about how about we're shaking the room right now. There's some shaking going on here. Okay, go ahead. But yeah, like bleaching cream is like very big, and I've seen like different documentaries, especially the ones in Jamaica. Like skin bleaching is very big there, like very big. You see like dance hall people that before they were brown, and then next thing you know, they're looking red. Like it's crazy.
Vicky, we know we can talk about that in the studio.
Oh, we can talk about bleaching for days.
Yeah,
For
like
Like
sure.
even
big.
in our Sudanese culture, like even people I grew up with in Rochester, like as soon as we hit like 13, 14 years old, like when we were in gym class, you would see people pull out Carol Light, which is a strong bleaching cream. I'm not gonna mention any names, but I remember like being in gym class looking at people like, damn, like you really out here with that? And they'll be like, yeah, my mom bought this for me. And them things are expensive.
Encouraging it.
And yeah, encouraging it, especially knowing our history, knowing what we went through because of our complexion, and knowing how heavily melanated we are. And that's something to be deeply proud of, our nilotic skin and our nilotic tribes and everything. It's just horrifying to know that people are doing it so regularly. I fell in love with an artist. Her name is Haram al-Noor, which means woman of the light. And she's a Sudanese singer. And when she started off in her singing career, she had such beautiful brown melanated skin. And then over time, she's completely bleached her skin to the point where she's like completely pale. And as a woman who's working her way up in the industry, I feel like she might have felt like she had to do that in order to gain or garner enough success to continue on with her career. So it's always something that I just think about, like.
And like,
I feel like
that's the, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And that's the thing with like the difference between Ariana Grande and Nicki Minaj. They say that Nicki Minaj is like bleaching her skin, and that's what people always try to get at with her. They say like in every picture she looks lighter, but then with Ariana Grande, she's trying to get darker. And it's like, what's the disconnect here? Like, why do Black people or people of color want to get lighter, but like people that are not born lighter, they want to get darker?
Hell, even with Beyonce, like if you looked at pictures of her back in the 90s, they can say it's the camera all they want, but she was more caramel than she is as light as she is right now. Like even like all our major celebrities look a lot lighter right now than they were 10 years ago.
And I'm wondering also if that is just the shift that has also happened with makeup and the contouring. I'm just saying, I wonder if that's
some technology advancements with cameras, you know, the quality may have gotten better, but I definitely like seen it. Like, yeah, Beyonce was definitely more
caramel and brown.
Or like fashion photographers when they go in on, I can't remember who it was, but there was a woman of color who was on a magazine cover, and she has darker skin, and in the magazine cover they had lightened her skin significantly. It did not go unnoticed by anybody. I don't remember for the life of me who it was. I just remember that it happened. I'm sure it's something that goes on a lot more. That one was more noticeable.
Yeah, I know you guys mentioned that kind of stuff, bleaching the skin, and is like more promoted. Like it's promoted definitely like in households at times, but a lot of like beauty magazines, a lot of beauty companies, even until recently, haven't really promoted the goodness of a darker complexion. They shy away from it. They don't celebrate it, and so that puts women off. They think like there might be something wrong with how they look, or there's, it creates problems.
Right. So. Definitely.
Like, specifically, like about with our community, South Sudanese community, like I feel like especially like after our war, and we were exposed to more foreign countries and stuff like that. That's when like a lot of our beauty ideologies, even like let's just talk about religion for a second. Like before South Sudan had the civil war, only 15% of us practiced Christianity. Now 85% of South Sudanese people are Christians, and that also that happened with our beauty standards. Like before we left South Sudan, before all of that, like being a dark-skinned, tall South Sudanese girl with a gap, that was the ideal beauty standard. Now, a light-skinned girl, like her dowry for marriage would be more than like a dark-skinned girl like me.
Yeah, that's.
And
You say that's because of like the media and like the opening up of the country
yeah,
to influences.
yeah,
And
I definitely do think it does have the media does play a big part of it because now that like we're out here, we're not just with like among South Sudanese people, we're watching the TV. We never see girls like us on TV. Yeah, it's getting better now in like from the 2010s to 2020, but like before that, like we never saw girls that looked like us. So with that being said, now we're trying to find any way possible to look like what they're telling us to look like, because this is the dominant culture.
Yeah.
And
Resist.
also, yeah, and unfortunately, we didn't resist. We're trying to assimilate to this culture that we didn't know we'd be thrown into. Because
right.
Sudanese people only came out to the America like what, starting in 1995. Before that, you never heard of us.
Period. Seriously. And I think there's a lot of self-love that needs to happen in our dark-skinned communities.
And healing, yeah.
A lot of healing.
South Sudanese people are very unique people. When you see one of us, you just know that's a South Sudanese person. So with that being said, like when South Sudanese people first came out to America and left, or even left South Sudan, we were getting bullied a lot for looking the way we were looking.
Definitely.
So that did push into the pressure of bleaching, and that's why it's so common in our culture, like especially with like our mom's generations. That's when like you see like more people bleaching, and those were the first people to leave the country.
Even amongst Black people, I remember being teased, like being called burnt because my skin was too dark for them. Being called burnt.
Because we don't look like anyone else.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking like, these are supposed to be my friends, and we're just of different complexions, and you're making me feel like I'm less than simply because of the color of my skin. I remember feeling horrible after that. I went to go talk to a counselor after that. I went to talk to my white high school counselor, and they were like, what does that even mean? They couldn't even relate. So it was just really hard at that point.
Yeah, even amongst like our fellow African countries, like even like our Somali friends and stuff like that, they never saw people that were as dark as us, that had such unique features. So we were bullied by other Africans too.
And I think another thing we haven't touched on yet is texturism. Are you gonna hit on that? Because still to this day,
I wasn't getting right there yet, but I was just gonna say like a little thing too, like just going back to Nigeria. Bollywood is very big in Nigeria, like very big. They love it down there. I didn't even know what it was until we went. They were just like, yeah, turn this on. This is our show. I was like, yeah.
The Indians?
Bollywood, period.
Bollywood, they love it. Like, it even got to the point where they picked up on the language so they can speak. Yeah, like, it's crazy. Like, they love Bollywood down there. So I definitely think that also has to do with, like, the bleaching, too, because, like, that's what they're seeing in the media, lighter skin, like, women. So I just wanted to say that little bit. But, yeah, definitely we can talk about texturism. And about, and that just has to do with like the hair texture of the more African root textured hair all the way to the more European
looser
curls. And that's still what we see. That's still what we see in a lot of these advertisements for shampoo and conditioner. You never see,
even with the natural stuff. Yeah,
exactly. You never see a Black woman with 4C hair in these commercials. It's always somebody with a looser curl or a pretty afro, like, not to call it pretty, all afros are pretty, period, texture, but that's just basically the European idea. The looser the curl, the more closer it is in proximity to whiteness, the better it is for our sales.
That's true. Even in 2020, like, I don't think I've ever seen like a hair advert with anyone with 4C hair. Like, I'm trying to think right now. I don't think it's ever happened.
Never.
Yeah, I don't watch much TV, but I don't remember a single commercial.
Do you understand, Mariah, Bria, Jose, when we say 4C hair?
Yeah, that really tight like coil.
Yes.
Yep.
Like some like this right here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get y'all all up in my in my roots.
There's a movie on Netflix and I can't remember what it's called, but I know it's
Good hair.
No, it's like a rom-com, but this woman and her mom started relaxing.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. She shaves her hair off.
Yeah, like she
Ever After or something like that.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
That's right, Monica.
Yeah. And it's like, it's kind of about her, like she starts dating this this really cute salon owner guy, and his daughter is very woke about the hair thing. She's like, why are you relaxing your hair? It's really bad for your hair. Like, why are you doing that? Like, yeah,
right.
That sort of.
Ooh, send that to me, Ruba.
I think the daughter started following her too, right? As the movie went on, I think the daughter started watching her, and she wanted to change her hair too, if I remember.
Yeah, she did.
So it's like modeling for the next generation, you know?
Right.
And then she changed her hair.
Definitely.
I was so happy. I'm like,
But I have a question. Do y'all that are like working, do you feel like you need to style your hair in a certain way in the workplace?
I always put on a wig for job interviews until I get the job, until I'm seated in my seat. And then that's when I'll be like, okay, now I can let my locks loose.
I know when I had locks, there's something about locks that really intrigues white people.
Yes.
Yes. But when it came down to those like curly locks that I had crocheted, I still want to go back to them. I love them so much. But when I had them, constantly at work, I was getting touched without permission by white women and teachers just coming up and touching my hair.
It's not touching, it's petting at that point.
Petting.
Yeah.
Assaulting me by trying to touch my hair and see what was up. And I had to talk to the principal about it, and the principal had to shut them down. Thank God she did. But it's really hard because I want to be able to be myself and express myself the way that I want to express myself and wear what I want to wear and do my hair like how I want to do my hair. But I have to think about those things. And then I also work with kids now. So I have to think, is my wig secure? Because these kids will push me home like nothing. So I have to really make sure. And to be honest, there was a time I had locks at my current job, and one of the locks came out, and this white woman came after me, and she was laughing. She was chuckling a bit, and she was like, "Oh, one of your things came out." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then I seen the lock in the other room, and I was just like, there's a better way to handle that whole situation. I felt like
it couldn't have been me.
That
I would
pissed
have
me
been
off.
with it. I would have been like, "Oh my gosh, I have a condition, and you're I have a problem."
I definitely felt like she should have just been more discreet about it. And I remember talking to my kid, even though the kid is nonverbal, I was like, they don't really love us, like they say they support us, but they don't support us. And I was so mad. I was just like, I grabbed the lock and I threw it. I hid it and put it in my pocket or something. But I was just like,
girl, I'm annoyed. What's her email address, please?
Stop. But literally, like, this shit was crazy. And I've had situations, I told y'all about the situation.
Teacher groups, and they're not educated about this topic. Like, they don't know how to learn. They're not even open to learning. Like, when they're talking about Black Lives Matters, and a lot of teachers are saying, "Oh, this is politics. Why are you bringing this into these groups? This group is about sharing cute classrooms and all this stuff." Bullshit. Anyway, so they're not knowledgeable. They don't know how to interact with people of color, or I don't know. And I don't know how to solve it because educators are not educated about certain topics, and it's disappointing.
Disappointing.
That's like the thing at the school that should not be named. A lot of those people that are going to these professions, whether it's medical or educators or whatever it may be, it's like yes, y'all came from these small towns, but don't let these small towns limit the way that you think, because it's
yeah,
that y'all are going into the professional field and y'all have this type of mindset. I went on another service trip my freshman year, and the teachers there were asking me, did I really like the students? And it's a predominantly Black school. It's a predominantly private Black school.
That's where you were doing service at.
Yeah, and and they even thought I was one of the students when I went to go and get my coat one day, and I was like, what? What is going on? But that's besides the point. But it's like the fact that it's like, why do you go into this profession if you're not open into thinking and the way that you should treat people?
Exactly.
Because I saw this post the other day. It's like a lot of these Karens are teachers. They're the type of people to call the school resource officer on a student instead of doing de-escalating tools. It doesn't get to that point where you're calling an officer, and that's the beginning of the school to prison pipeline.
Prison pipeline, yes.
Oh, it's just like, it's very concerning. I'm forever thankful for my one friend that's in the education department that graduated, that's not of color. She's very big on educating people. It's very scary to just see the way that people are going into these professional fields with that type of mindset, especially medical.
Oh my gosh.
Scary for Black
That's
women.
the scariest one.
Scary. I avoid hospitals. If I'm ever sick, I look up home remedies, or it's my time, and I do it at home. It'll be my time at home, because especially with all these women like dying during like giving birth, it's crazy. Like it really is, because these people will go into these professional fields and feel like, you know what, this person's life isn't worth anything, and I have the power to do what I want to do.
Right. And having that bias, whether it's unconscious or conscious, it definitely affects the way that you treat your patients.
Definitely.
I've looked up so many studies when I was working at much research that talked about medical professionals giving less anesthesia
to Black women,
to Black men, to Black people, or giving a more higher amounts to compensate when they knew that they were being tested for it, being examined and watched. And then you also see rehabilitation centers that aren't giving, enough rehabilitation to people of color. And it's just like, it was a constant thing everywhere I went. I know my supervisor didn't want me to look into it as much, because I was supposed to be focused on concussions, but the more and more I delved into the research, the more I delved into the injustice that existed in that. And she, I know she wasn't like exactly fond of me, but I did what I had to do. I felt like I was just so disturbed by everything that I was learning. And then now to see people bringing more attention to it, it really is something that needs to be fixed. But I don't know how much attention people are actually giving to it. Like, we're aware of it, but what are the medical professionals doing in order to ensure that Black women are staying alive, Black people are staying alive, and that they're being checked on consistently?
Especially with that most recent one in New York, where they gave her epidural when she said that she didn't want any, and then she ended up dying.
Anyway,
like
that, and that's that. Like, Black people haven't trusted the government with medical care since the Tuskegee Project. I don't know if you guys are all familiar about that.
During
and then like
being tested on.
Yeah, so it's like this country has a dark history with the medical treatment it provides Black people, and like most Black people will do anything they can to not go to a hospital because of this, and that's really dangerous. That's why we always catch these diseases last minute, but after
in their
like
final
things,
stages.
but things that we could have prevented and cured right away. And something needs to be done. It's like, how loud do we have to scream?
Right. And even like, I know that they were talking about bringing down the statue of the father of gynecology who tested on Black women's genitals.
Black women, did all his tests on Black women, killed a lot of Black women in the process.
Mhm.
I guess speaking specifically a Black woman who was in the medical system, Henrietta Lacks. And
Yes.
Yes.
the book was
Mhm.
written by a white journalist, and
Yes.
it's been a couple of years since I've read it, but that was the first time I had heard of her. And it's not uncommon in our history for women of color to have been forcibly sterilized after giving birth. I know
Definitely.
that has happened a lot, particularly to Black women.
Yeah, especially with the whole eugenics program.
Mhm.
That whole
government
nonsense.
put out.
Yeah.
That's why Black people don't trust Planned Parenthood either. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah. Yeah, she was the founder was yeah.
Sanger.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was very much a eugenicist. Margaret, what was her name? Margaret
Sanger or something like that.
Margaret Sanger. Yeah. I know that in Iowa we have the some people go to the Emma Goldman Clinic in Iowa City as an alternative if they don't want to go to Planned Parenthood. I don't know much about it aside from the fact that Emma Goldman I think she was like an anarchist or something. That's all I know about her.
Oh wow.
Sarah, I definitely want to know the answer to my question about the hair thing. Did you like ever have to style your hair a certain way before you became your own boss now?
Always. I always have to do that. Like I try to switch it up sometimes, but for the most part, I would say to keep the professional, like I'm the only Black person in my department. I'm always the only Black person in my department. So I'm always slick back, most of the time. Unless it's Friday, then I might let it down. But other than that, yeah, no. I don't wear my hair like that. Or I straighten it for interviews. So yeah, they don't know what I look like for real.
Period.
They don't know.
Be in disguise with them. And I feel like that's crazy too, because like, why do we have to go through all these hoops just to get a job? Like, it's crazy.
And a lot of times it's mostly based on people and we don't know a lot of people in higher positions most of the time.
That's true.
And that's what they call, like, a lot of people refer to stuff like that, like the part of the 400-year head start. Like, money.
Yes.
And then, like, the fact that y'all have people in high places that we don't have in high places because your history is different from ours. Like, y'all had a lot more privilege, and we can jump into privilege here. But yeah, that's definitely that definitely has to do with the fact of the privilege that people have, because it's not common for people to see somebody that looks like them or a family member that in these higher places because of that ceiling that stops them.
Definitely. And we can talk about the wealth gap too. Like, how many years will it take for us to even catch up?
At this point,
catch up?
When we got people like Jeff Bezos hogging up all the resources.
Yeah. Who the hell needs
Mr.
that?
Amazon.
Right. Like,
he got richer during COVID. Like, that's just messed up.
Definitely. And then
like, what the hell?
When we look at how everybody was donating their bits and pieces, he literally donated, knowing how much he has, he donated a freaking pinch. Did he?
Get this. No, he actually put up a fundraiser on Amazon.com asking people to donate to essential workers. This man that's worth $25 billion asked us to donate.
Celebrities too. Celebrities. That was crazy.
Ooh, girl, that makes me sick when I think about it. People are literally dying of hunger in this country.
And in the world too.
In the world, yes.
Yeah. How many problems could he
Right,
fix?
and he's shipping worldwide. That man's shipping worldwide, getting worldwide. He's not giving back to these people that are struggling.
There's Amazon all over the world.
From Amazon. No more from America.
Friend who moved to Mexico because it's worse here than it is there in terms of racism for her. She's
Yeah.
And featureism.
I have a little story on white privilege that I just like experienced. I was well, not like me myself. I was talking to a guy. I can't remember what I posted. I posted something about white privilege, you know, and he's like, "I can't believe you're buying into this fake bullshit." And I'm like, "Okay, explain yourself," because I like to. My dad always says to know your enemy and try to like understand where they're coming from.
Know
So
the strategies of the oppressor.
yeah, so I was talking to this guy, and I'm like, "I have a question for you," and he's like, "What's up?" I said, "What do you do when the cops pull you over?" And he's like, "What does that have to do with anything?" And I'm thinking, okay, this guy obviously
Everything.
doesn't. That's what, right. So I'm like, well, just answer the question. What do you do when the cops pull you over? I asked him what's wrong, and I'm like, okay, so I'm asking you, what do you physically do when the cops pull you over? When the cops pull you over? And he's like, I don't do anything. And I'm like, okay, well, my dad told me that he has to put his hands on the dashboard, not move a muscle. And when the cop comes and says, "Can I get your ID?" Excuse me. My dad says, "Yes, I will grab my ID for you. It is in my left back pocket. May I reach my hand back there and get my ID from my left back pocket?" Cop says, "Yes, you may." And then he slowly gets it out and shows him and everything. And I told this guy that, and he's like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense. The cop's just an asshole." And I'm like, ah! I had to block this guy because I couldn't
You couldn't get through to him.
I couldn't, but I tried, and like
He's not there
like,
yet.
right. And I'm like, white privilege is the fact that you can be like, "Oh, I don't know, I just sat there, you know, I was just like hanging out."
Right.
Like, yeah. So that's like a little thing that I just experienced, and that pissed me off. But
Right.
yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you came for him though, as you should. That dude had
Sorry,
no idea.
I didn't hear that. What did you say?
I said I'm glad you came for him. He didn't have the range or the depth to continue having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
That's people at square one.
Square one.
But maybe he'll do some research. I don't know. Like, I hope
Maybe
that
you planted a seed. Yep.
I hope I planted a seed.
Some people just need to witness it in order to believe it.
Right.
And like, I feel like this whole revolution, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm sorry it took me so long to get educated." It's like a lot of this stuff is opening their eyes, but it's like it hasn't been hidden to y'all. It's just like it's in your face now, and you have to look. So it's just
yeah.
It's sad that it has to take it to that extent for people to understand like the seriousness of like the things that Black people go through.
Right.
But I mean, I'm glad that they learn it.
And it's sad that it took all this chaos to happen. Because for years we've been talking about like what we go through as Black people. So how could all of us be like complaining about the same thing for years and you don't think like, oh, maybe I should do my research or whatever?
Right.
It's not imaginary.
Exactly. And that's another thing I've had to deal with. Like now feeling I've always felt like, you know, they try to make us seem hysterical when we talk about the racism that we deal with as Black women, as Black people. And then now it's like, oh, now I see the light. Like all those years of invalidation, and it took shaking the fucking room, shaking the fucking nation for you to actually
burning down a city.
Literally, an uprising. It had to happen for you to finally validate our experience.
It wasn't us though. Disclaimer. That was
I was there.
White
it was
coming to my city and burning
anarchists.
Yeah, burning like historical places that have been there that were meaningful, that were and are meaningful to us. So
yeah.
But,
no, honestly, I was there, and I didn't see not one Black person with any arsony on them.
Let's talk about it.
Black people don't even play with fire. Like in our regular lives, like when have you ever heard of a Black person like just starting shit on fire just for the hell of it?
True.
Why would we burn our barbershops?
Nobody would burn their own community Come on. And then people had the audacity to be like, look at what they're doing in the community. I'm so happy people were exposing
They felt foolish.
Video
They
evidence.
felt foolish.
the bricks that were placed in certain spots so that people could just react and throw bricks and start things on fire, like with them looting. I am not supportive of the fact that they went and stole some jeans. We have to really question.
But you feel comfortable in this country, right? You feel comfortable in this country.
You have to really question your support. If you're willing to question whether or not you support Black people because somebody went in and took jeans,
are you? So you're okay with police murdering innocent people that they swore to serve and protect, but you're not mad about? Like, it's just crazy. It was just all crazy to me. Like, that looting hurts you more than the actual lives that were lost.
Preach.
That's placing emphasis on capitalism over human lives.
Yeah.
Oh, they're saying it's only one bad cop, you know?
Oh God, I hate it when people say that.
System. And don't even get me started.
Video. Just the hoops that people jump through to try to justify like police violence against Black people.
He shouldn't have ran.
And I'm
Why
like,
did he resist?
Yeah, and I'm like,
and he was breathing audibly.
Even
his
with video
coming out of his mouth was threatening.
Yeah,
like
craziness. Evidence of all of these things, all these extremely traumatic things going around, and it's like people try to justify it, and I'm like, there's no justification for it whatsoever.
They try to say that George Floyd died from COVID.
God, yeah, it's just the hoops that people will jump through to justify the violent systemic racism is just.
Can't hear you. Gotta unmute yourself.
There
you go. But
I was just saying, like, wasn't that the first thing they said? And then his family had to hire a private investigator.
He got tested for COVID, but that's not what he died from.
No,
of course.
Talk about it.
We all watched that 9-minute video.
Oh, I didn't watch the whole thing. I can't do it to myself.
But we know what happened.
But yeah, I know what happened, and it definitely wasn't COVID. COVID is not dressed up.
I think he actually recovered from COVID. That's what I heard. He recovered from COVID and then died from the police. Yeah.
Wow.
Hitting the tip of the iceberg. Everything that's hitting the news, not everything that is happening.
Did y'all see the recent one where they like took the guy's nose and they were closing his nose as he was having like a seizure or something?
Oh my God.
Did he die?
I didn't watch the full thing, but he was in the police car, arrested, and like you just saw him like shaking. And then you just see like 2 police officers on one side, one police officer on another side, and they're like closing his nose.
Oh hell no!
Yeah,
I haven't seen that one.
It's just so much traumatic imagery that is coming out for Black people to see, and it's really a lot. And I know a lot of our allies want to do well by posting these things.
These Black square people.
But literally performative allies, yes. Literally a lot of them don't understand that. I know you care about those, or you're trying to show me that you care about those who have died and passed away, as we should bring attention to that. But we also need to bring attention to those who are living and dealing with the racial trauma of this incident. And it's constantly being posted over and over again. It's so overwhelming. And I've seen people try to justify it. Well, people need to see this. People need to see this. But we are also going through this. This is a death in
every day.
Yes, every day.
And it's like,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like they're normalizing Black people being slaughtered.
And it's a fetishization as well that needs to be acknowledged. A lot of people like to repost those things, but not really talk about the systems at hand. Want to talk about the imagery and repost the imagery of violence out. What are you actually doing with that?
Yeah, like let's repost solutions or ideas, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like I experienced less racism down here, believe it or not. Go ahead.
But like with that, a lot of people don't understand that even though it's so cheap down there, you have to realize how much people are getting paid down there. Why do you think it's so cheap? It's cheap to us up here, but to them down there, it's probably expensive. looking at houses that are, because I've seen some beautiful houses in Texas when I was down there. And
Atlanta
like,
too.
Yeah, like they're very big and beautiful, and it's like, but you really have to think about, like, before you want to move down here, everyone's like, oh my God, I need to move down here. I need to move down here. But it's like, you're getting paid way more up here than you would get down there. And you have to realize, like, everything that glitters is not gold. Like,
period.
But to testify to the fact that you say you feel like you're experiencing less racism down there, like when I was talking to someone that lived in Georgia when I went to this, not a fair, but a conference. And I had asked her, like, do you feel like you learned a lot more history living in the South than you did coming up here? Because she became a teacher in Minnesota. And she agreed with me, because that's what I really felt it was. Like when I lived in Georgia, I learned a lot more about a lot more history there than I did when I moved back up here. Like the trail, I learned a lot more besides the Trail of Tears when it came to like the Native Indigenous people history, because it started in Georgia, a lot of the Creek and Cherokee people. So it was just like, why is there so much shielding or making it seem like it's all roses in the North when we need to know what was really going on up here? Like,
okay, that part.
Yep.
That part.
I feel like people up here are getting robbed from their education. I learned way more. That's what I'm like. That's like one of the big things I miss about living in Georgia, because I learned way more in like everything than I did when I like moved back up here. And it was just crazy. It's like stuff that I knew about, people didn't know what I was talking about. Like they were very confused. So yeah, I don't know.
The Midwest niceness and sort of just dancing around issues.
They don't want to feel uncomfortable. Like even just teaching us about civil rights in school, you saw all the white people in class start shifting and looking at you, and they didn't want to go through that. So I feel like down south, like they don't have that Minnesota nice that we have up there. Like down south, like they like, okay. So here's when I said I experienced less racism here. I just want to also like just put out there, like I'm surrounded by more Black people than I ever have since I lived in Africa. I lived in Africa when I was like 16, 17 years old. So this is the most Black people I've ever been around in my life outside of Africa. So here, like in my everyday, like in my day-to-day life, I don't really interact with white people. I know it sounds crazy, but I really don't see white people like that. Like I only see them when I go grocery shopping. So in that time, like I don't have time. Like I never, like in Minnesota, you can go to a grocery store and then like you'll have a conversation with someone. That doesn't happen here in Texas. Like you just mind your own business the whole way through. When I see white people, I just know they don't fuck with me. And we just keep it moving. There's no room for like even like for someone to talk down on me, for someone to look at me dirty. We're just doing our own separate thing at all fucking times. Excuse my French. Oh my gosh.
No, it's fine.
Edit that out.
Huh. Because I've heard about people talking about segregation still existing in the South, whether or not they want to acknowledge it.
It still exists. Like even like most of the jobs I've had, I've worked around mostly Black people.
And I don't think it limits to just the South having that segregation, because I didn't know that Chicago was segregated. Like until I did not, because whenever I went there, I was only seeing my Black family members. So like I didn't think nothing of it until like there's these areas, you know, there's the people that speak Spanish, there's the Black people, there's the white people's area. So it's just like all these areas are divided.
Definitely, with big
and they're not talked about.
New York City.
And they even said like, I met this girl when I went to another conference earlier this year. She was talking about, she's from St. Louis, and she said like it's very racially divided there, and it's very hard to get to the other side. It's like a railroad track.
the train is constantly there and it doesn't stop for you to cross over to experience what's going on over there.
Wow.
And I was like, I didn't know this. Because
like Houston's not that bad.
The South.
Houston is not that not that badly segregated, but it's like you really fuck with your own race down here only. And like when I there's like certain areas where you'll see everyone, you'll see different people vibing and stuff like that. But like when I go out and when I go to restaurants and I go to like hell, even like a bar or something like that, or a grocery store, you never see like you rarely see two people from two separate races. If you do see two people from different races, it's probably like a Black and Latin person together.
I guess what I'm thinking of is I keep thinking back to I don't know why, I just keep thinking back to my education that I received growing up as a white person in the Midwest, which is considered, historically it's considered part of the North. And I think Iowa was a state by the time the Civil War came around. And the way that I remember being taught about like the Civil War and slavery and stuff was it was very much in this mentality of, oh, the South did that. It was only
that's another thing.
Yep, me too.
It never happened in the North. And I grew how it was taught is that like the North is good. It was always good. There's never anything like, and then I got older and I was like, well,
yeah. I wish Jose was here because there was a time when it was me, Tolu, and Tiara. We were at dinner with Jose, and Jose was talking about how in his class, a lot of the people thought that they were separate from the legacy of the South. They were talking about history as though, the North never had to deal with racism.
Yeah.
But obviously, we had to deal with a lot of racism. We still deal with it till this day. But because of the Civil War, a lot of the times people just have this idea that the South is the bad one, but we push for freedom. So we were more in progress. We were more
but they don't consider the fact that this was never about slavery to begin with. The war wasn't about slavery. This is just the effect of the war that slaves were freed, but it wasn't about slavery to begin with.
Wasn't just like the racism that I experienced from white people and non-Black people. It was also the fact that I didn't feel supported by my Black women. Like fellow Black women would go out of their way to invalidate my experiences. And that really hurt me, especially knowing the history that I had with these women. And I get that some people don't want to be about pro-Blackness. I get that some people don't want to speak out.
Stir the pot.
Exactly. But at the same time, I wouldn't go out of my way to invalidate somebody else's voice simply because you don't have it in you. So you're going to speak against somebody who's speaking out about the injustices. Like, it doesn't make sense to me, because if something was to happen to you, I would be speaking out for you. We would be speaking out for you. But it was like a constant invalidation from my fellow Black women, and that's something that I still need to heal from. I know that I had Tolu, I know that I had Tiara, I know that I had people later on who showed me that support, and I even had support from non-Black people. But it was just really hard because it was like the harsh reality of realizing that, even some Black people aren't pro-Black. But to know that I opened up to these Black women and the best that what they did to me, what I felt like they did to me, was just completely ignore everything and just completely invalidate it. Well, you're not the only Black person on campus, or, I don't understand why she's so angry or why she feels this way. Like, and to hear now that some of them are pushing for justice, like it's just like, it took your own time to develop, but like I said, I'm very entitled. I wanted acknowledgement sometimes, but I have to hold myself back. That was the hardest thing for me that I had to heal from. I remember talking about that in therapy a lot, because that really hurt me down to my core, to know that people who I viewed as family went out of their way to just sort of humiliate me, similar to how the white counterparts were doing me. And I just was like, do I have anybody who's on my side now? Do I have anybody who I can talk to, who can relate? It was really hurtful.
And there's like so many levels with that, because it's like those people that don't want to dip into confrontation or standing up for themselves or speaking up because they want to put up a mask or something to make it seem like, oh, I'm with you, not the person that's Black, but I'm with the majority that's being quiet, that's, you know, this person they won't be thrown into the stereotype of being an angry Black woman because I'm being quiet. Right. So I think that's one thing. And then on top of that, it's just though it kind of dips into like that anti-Blackness. You don't want to be associated with this group of Black people, but at the end of the day, like someone looks at you walking down the street, they're not going to be like, oh my God, this person's Angolian. No, they're going to look at you and say that you're Black because that's what it is. And you can't run away from who you are. You cannot. No matter what way you shape it, you shift it, you are who you are, and you need to be accepting of this. Because I remember I was in high school, and this wasn't my prom. This was like classes that were too up for me. And our principal was a Black woman. And they were like, the group of girls, they were just talking about like, oh, they're going to do this for prom. They're doing this for prom. Like, they're getting ready to buy this. And the principal was like, what are y'all trying to do? Turn it into a Black prom? And then, you know, that's kind of like what you said, Ruba, it's kind of like a slap in the face, because it's someone that looks like you that's trying to imply something, right? Make it seem like, well, what's wrong with the Black prom? Right. And how are we trying to make it into a Black prom? And what is the definition of a Black prom? Right. So it was just,
and even if that is, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. So it was it's just, you're talking to a group of Black females, and it's kind of like you're throwing dust in their eye there. Definitely. So I don't know. I really don't know why that happens. I don't know why there's such like a need within people to shift who they are or try to get away from it instead of like loving it.
I've seen it happen in predominantly white places a lot of the times, where Black people are like, I can't help you. And when another Black person enters the room and they're on the hiring committee or something, because they don't want to seem too interested in helping out their Black counterpart, right? So they even further distance themselves further from that. That
kind of reminds me of like Get Out, where the guy, he walked up to the other Black guy and like was trying to give him fist bump, and he got a handshake instead. That's kind of like what that is, because they don't want to be associated with Black people. Or like in the movies that like it'll be the one Black person, and then you'll see like a Black girl with maybe like a straight weave, and like the other Black girl walks up to her and, you know, it's like, oh, talking to her, you know, just like a friendly manner, and the girl's looking at her like, I'm not
distant, like
status as you. We're not on the same level.
Like trying to like silence the Blackness a little bit because they don't want to be too loud with it.
Sometimes that there are people who are fine just floating through life and not being a part of anything, just letting things be the way that they are. And sometimes that surprises me, but I know that there's always going to be a sort of spectrum, and there has to be a place for people like that in life. I get it. But it just always surprises me that there are people who are just fine with getting away with in life and just minding your business, not trying to change any mind, as I've heard before, just keeping it moving.
See, I like to mind my business, but not with topics like that.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, there are certain things that you can mind, but when it comes to your freedom and equality and equity, like, what is there to be silent about? What is there to?
So I want to thank you all for watching. We really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think about the things that were discussed within the video, and y'all just continue to hair flip on the, I took out some of my braids so y'all might be able to see it. Just hair flip on the haters and keep popping out here. Bye.